This is a continuation of the reading of Hell and Its Torments by St. Robert Bellarmine. I'll overlap one sentence. Now, these two tortures theologians call the penalty of loss and the penalty of sense. Let us first speak of the loss of happiness, which is the heavier penalty. My dear people, no penalty can be contrived or even imagined which is so monstrous that it is not surpassed by the penalty of losing the highest good. Now the heat of fire applied to the body causes such torture that it cannot be borne, but it only takes away the good constitution and temperament of the body, which is an altogether moderate and slender good. How fierce then will be the torture of that severing and tearing away from God, the mere sight of whom is so great a good that it instantly makes a person blessed and happy. Among the Romans, a mighty punishment, and that considered by far the mightiest of all, was exile. That is, when citizens, because of some great crime, were compelled to depart from the city and be deprived of the sight of their fellow citizens, and to live among barbarians on certain islands that were half wilderness. This was why Cicero, when he was recalled from exile, re-entered as it were a new world. He was stupefied, and in a manner of speaking confounded, heaven with earth. Behold the beauty of Italy, he said. Behold the fame of its towns, the loveliness of its territories. Behold its fields, its fruits, the beauty of Rome. Behold the humanity of its citizens, the dignity of the republic. Behold its majesty. What great sorrow, then, will they perceive who are barred from the palaces of heaven, from the commonwealth of the saints, from those happy regions where peace, love, joy, and tranquility reign, where the voice of praise and exaltation resounds, and the everlasting Alleluia is sung. And, ultimately, from that purest light, which make those who look upon it happy and blessed, what sorrow will they perceive, when instead they are compelled to inhabit forever the most stinking of dungeons, a bilge trough, fouled with every kind of filth, where no order but everlasting horror dwelleth. Job chapter 10, verse 22. Where no voice shall be heard but the voice of wailers and blasphemers, no sound but the sound of striking hammers and whips, and in the company of the whole monstrous and barbarous host of devils, and with all the scum of sinful mankind. But I perceive that some lovers of this present life will say, do we not in this present life lack all of those things which you have mentioned? Who of us abides in the palaces of heaven? Who of us enjoys that most pure light? But are we on that account saddened? Are we tormented? On the contrary, if it were permitted always to be in this body and to enjoy the goods of this present life, would we ever think about the goods of heaven? My dear people, this is a common deception of ignorant men who do not realize that after death we shall have different eyes and a different opinion and reckoning of things than we have now. St. John Chrysostom expressed this beautifully in the following words: He who burns in hell loses utterly the kingdom of heaven. This indeed is a greater penalty than the torment of flames. Now, I know that a great many people fear hell, yet I say that the loss of that great glory is a punishment more bitter than that of hell itself. It is not at all amazing if I cannot depict that punishment in a sermon, for since we do not know the blessedness of those heavenly prizes, we naturally can have no knowledge of what is involved in their loss. Nevertheless, we shall without doubt learn the magnitude of this loss when we shall have begun to be instructed by experience. It is then that our eyes shall be opened and the veil drawn back. It is then that impious men shall know, to their mighty sorrow, what a difference there is between the eternal and highest good and these fragile and perishable things of mortality. In order that we may illustrate this matter as best we can, accept, if you please, the following comparison. There was once a certain most mighty king who had no son to succeed him in the administration of his kingdom. One day he took notice of a boy who was of elegant and pleasing appearance, but of humble origin and slender means. He gave orders for the boy to be brought to him, and then he had his education entrusted to instructors. The king stipulated in his will that if upon reaching maturity the boy showed himself to be learned, wise, grave, and adorned with every manner of virtue, and likewise to be found to be suitable to man the helm of the state, he was to be proclaimed legitimate king and ruler, settled upon the royal throne, invested with the diadem and the scepter, and entrusted with the government of the entire kingdom. If, on the contrary, he turned out to be a man of the meanest sort of spirit, he was to be bound in chains and condemned to the galleys with all due ignominy and disgrace. The royal ministers immediately obeyed the king's command. The boy was summoned and handed over to instruction. Diligence was applied to his education in letters and manners, but the boy was enticed by other boys without realizing what was being done to him. The professor would no sooner set foot out of the house than the boy would stow his book in the farthest corner of the room and while away the whole day building little houses out of pottery fragments and playing other boyish games. Around evening, the professor would return and demand a recitation of the lessons, but the boy could scarcely remember where he had left his book. The irate professor would thrash the boy and overturn with his foot the little pottery houses he had built. He would say to the boy, "Oh, if you only knew what you are forfeiting by these childish pastimes of yours. If you knew how much loss this negligence in your studies is working upon you. You shall know by and by, but only when the understanding of it shall profit you nothing." Now the boy, being all boy, would weep at the professor's whipping and rebuke, but was even more tearful at the overthrow of his pottery houses. He gave not a thought to the words of the professor, nor yet to the king's will and testament. Indeed, the following day he would forget the thrashing and rebuke he had received. Once again he would build up his houses of pottery and betake himself to his accustomed childish games. When the boy grew up, the executor of the king's will found him to be rude, unschooled, and altogether unfit to govern the kingdom. They read the king's will to him, and then had him clapped in irons and banished to the galleys with the utmost disgrace. Now, which do you think he bore with more tears and bitterness, the toil of the galleys or the forfeiture of the kingdom? You may take it from me that he grieved bitterly enough over the fact that he had been condemned to the galleys, for I do not think that an unhappier state can be found here on earth. Indeed, they who have been sentenced to the galleys have nothing to expect but a bountiful serving of the whip. Yet I reckon that without any doubt he took it much more grievously and woefully to heart that he had been stripped of the honor of a most great and sumptuous kingdom. For what more miserable and unhappy thing can be mentioned or thought of than to have suffered the loss of a most splendid and noble kingdom on account of childish trifles? My dear people, to whom of us does this parable not apply? For while we live here on earth, we are children. We know nothing lofty. We contemplate nothing sublime. We are all occupied with ludicrous matters and childish trifles. With what great anxiety do we pile up our houses of mud? How do they differ from those pottery houses of the children, save that they are slightly greater in size? Of such are the enthusiasm of merchants, the ambitions of office holders and courtiers, the moles of architects, the contentions of kings and princes over cities, over provinces, over kingdoms. Of such are the lawsuits of private citizens over possessions, over boundaries, over drainage rights. Yea, they are all trifles. They are trifles, only slightly larger in size than those of children. And therefore, as St. Augustine says, are they called business. Footnote, negotium, business, from nuga, trifle, translator. Yet, even though all these things I have mentioned are trifles, when compared to the business of the life to come, yet they keep the vast majority of people so occupied that they cannot give a thought to the business of the heavenly kingdom, which is the one true and serious business of life. All these things are seen by the heavenly professor who has taken our instruction under his charge, that we may be found worthy to lay hold upon the kingdom of heaven. He does not cease to grieve over all our little twists and turns, and to cry out, "O children, how long will you love childishness, and fools covet these things which are hurtful to themselves?" Proverbs chapter 1, verse 22. Why do you love vanity and seek after lying? Psalm 4, verse 3. And then with his foot he overturns our little houses of pottery. He often confounds our designs. A merchant awaits a cargo freighter loaded with goods from the Orient, and behold, he hears that the ship has been wrecked and all his merchandise sunk in the ocean. Some other man places all his hope in his son, and trusts that in a short time he will become a doctor of theology, a canonist, even pope. He builds upon him all the lofty towers of his thoughts, and behold, he hears that a slight fever has come upon his son, and that now, after a few days, the boy has reached the close of his life. Another man is invited to a wedding, to an elegant luncheon, to an illustrious drinking party. He makes ready to go, and behold, an ailment comes upon him, and he is compelled to effect its cure by abstaining from wine and food. Who is it, I ask you, who does these things to us? Who is it who thus eludes the thoughts and counsels of men? My dear people, it is our professor who does these things, and he does them not because he hates us, but because he dearly loves us, for he wishes to cut away the impediments that hold us back as we run our course toward heaven, and that keep us from paying heed to the choice of heaven we have made, truly after the manner of foolish children. We bear with a mean spirit the overthrow of our houses of pottery, the loss of earthly resources, and other chastisements of the Lord. Yea, we pile up yet again our little pottery houses, but to the kingdom of heaven, to which we are called through these lashings, we give no thought. But the time will come, believe me, the time will come when through the gate of death we shall enter another world, a world where we shall suddenly find that we are full-grown adults, a new region where no child can be found. For all of us, when we pass hence out of this life, are by that very passage changed into grown men. There it shall be announced to us, for you had been prepared the kingdom of heaven, and those most beautiful domiciles, if only you had given heed to true wisdom. But because you preferred to be foolish children and despise the voice and admonitions of the professor, you shall be cast forth with ignominy and disgrace into the outer darkness, where there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Matthew chapter 25, verse 30, and other tortures and eternal punishments. My dear people, what shall we say then? What shall we think then of those little pottery houses, those ludicrous honors, those childish businesses, when we shall perceive more clearly than the light of the sun that on account of shadows and dreams we have brought about the loss of things which are inexplicably good, truly lasting, and never perishing? Oh, with what grief of spirit shall sinful men then say, what hath pride profited us? Or what advantage hath the boasting of riches brought us? Wisdom chapter 5, verse 8. What did it profit us to go running over all lands and oceans in order to pile up wealth? What did it profit us to spend such great labors to maintain our state in the palaces of princes? What did it profit us to apply such intense art to the courting of great honors, that is, to the courting of earth and ashes, so that we might attain to honors ourselves? What did it profit us to rack our brains and spend whole nights in study, so that we could comprehend the most obscure authors and capture from them some ray of light? For behold, all these things have passed like shadows, and we have been ignorant of true honors, true riches, true pleasures, true wisdom of the true and highest and eternal good, and we have lost these things past any hope of regaining them. My dear people, this grief of spirit will be so great that although all of the damned will surely know that every access to eternal beatitude has been closed to them, and that the greatest gulf has been put between themselves and the place of the blessed, yet by the force of natural desire they will not be able to refrain from speaking the words, Lord, Lord, open to us. Matthew chapter 25, verse 11. Our most wise doctor, St. John Chrysostom, therefore says, hell is indeed an intolerable thing. Who does not know that the punishment of hell is also horrible? Now, if a person were to posit the existence of 1,000 hells, he could say nothing that would accurately convey what it is to be thrust away from the honor of that blessed glory of heaven, to be hated by Christ, and to hear from him the words, I never knew you. Matthew chapter 7, verse 23. And to be charged with having denied food and drink to him when he hungered and thirsted. It would be better to endure 1,000 bolts of lightning than to see that face of gentleness and piety turned away from us, and those eyes full of all tranquility, in no way able to bear the sight of us. The loss of the highest good carries with it the loss of all other good things as well. What does this mean? Simply that the eyes of the damned shall never again perceive any beautiful sight, nor their ears any sweet singing, nor their sense of taste any joyful savor, nor their sense of touch any gentle thing. For once a person has been excluded from the consortium of God, he is plunged once and for all into the ocean of all woes and calamities, without any hope of escape. Let me conclude at this point what I have to say concerning the loss of the highest good, and proceed now to that torture which theologians have called the penalty of sense. This torture is so named because it is to be applied to the senses and energies, to those of the body without as well as of the soul within. Let us speak first of the torture of the interior senses. There are 4 faculties of the soul which pertain to this matter before us, and which will be tortured by astonishing torments in hell. The first is that faculty to which the Greeks gave the name phantasia, but to which we give the name thought. The second is memory. The third is intelligence, and the fourth is will. The faculty of thought will be tortured by a certain most weighty grasp of the torments in which the body and spirit shall then dwell. For if in this life some grievous pain can so subdue thought unto itself, that a man, even though he fervently wishes, cannot keep from thinking of that pain, what shall be wrought in souls by the punishments of hell, which are greater beyond compare? Thus thought shall make pains acute, and pains shall excite thought, and they shall mutually so fuel each other that they will leave no place at rest in the souls or bodies of the damned. Such shall be the perpetual contemplations of those who could have fruitfully meditated upon these things, but have refused to do so, of those who scorn here on earth to apply the most useful thoughts as a bridle against their lusts. In the life to come, these very thoughts shall be cruel executioners to torment them. Memory also shall be no slight cross to the souls of the damned, when it shall put before them the old time happiness and bygone pleasures, for the sake of which they have come down to these torments. For then, finally, they shall know with what bountiful salt were sprinkled those banquets which once seemed so sweet to them, and with what sharp pepper they were seasoned. But much more mightily shall they be tortured when they compare the brevity of bygone pleasures to the eternity of their present sorrows. For what mathematician can be found who is so learned that he can define for us the great gulf by which time is surpassed by eternity? What bellowings, therefore, shall they give forth? What sighs shall they heave up from their inmost hearts, when by careful process of thought they shall discover that pleasures lasting for scarcely a moment in time have passed away like a shadow or a dream, while sorrows shall have no end or term. Intelligence, because it is a more eminent and keen-sighted faculty, shall be tortured with a more intolerable cross. For in this faculty shall be found that worm which sacred Scripture so often threatens upon sinners when it says, "Their worm shall not die, and their fire shall not be quenched." Isaiah chapter 66, verse 24. For as a worm rises from wood and gnaws constantly at the very wood from which it has risen, so too is this worm born of sin, and with it carries on an everlasting war. For this worm is nothing other than perpetual penance, a penance full of raving and desperation and pain arising from sins, pain which shall fasten its clutches on the souls of the damned when they realize that because of those sins they have lost the kingdom of heaven and brought on themselves these indescribable tortures. We read in the book of Genesis that the Egyptians once had 7 years of such fertility and abundance that they ran out of silos in which to pile up their grain. These were followed by 7 other years of such unproductiveness and penury that they were compelled to barter their money, their fields, their cattle, and their very selves for grain. What could describe how mightily they grieved during this latter time over their negligence in conserving grain at a time when the very mass of it was overflowing their granaries? What could describe their grief at not having provided for the time of future penury, when the diligent stockpiling of grain would not only have freed them from poverty and hunger, but would also have made them most rich? My dear people, the worm of the damned is such that it knows no rest, day or night, but forever chews, gnaws, consumes, and feeds upon the entrails of the wretched. Neither can the wretched ever forget what a splendid opportunity they had here on earth, not only of avoiding these penalties at a meager cost, but of securing the kingdom of heaven at a slender price. As it is, they wrangle with each other forever and say, "Woe unto us! To us the kingdom of heaven was offered, and offered gratis. Nay, we were even pleaded with to accept it, and we refused. If we had repented of our sins and confessed them all would have been forgiven." Would penance and confession have been such colossal ordeals? If we had implored mercy, it would have most readily been granted us. If we had asked for God's bounty, it would have been there for us. Or if we had offered a cupful of cold water for God's sake, we would have come upon eternal life. But now we shall fast forever. We shall be afflicted forever, and derive no fruit from it. Oh, that golden time which has now passed away, and shall never return for eternity. What did the world offer us that we dared to provoke such a terrible God to wrath? Yea, if all the kingdoms and empires of the world had been offered to us, and if it had been granted us to enjoy them in peace for many thousands of years, what would this have been compared to the least of these everlasting punishments? This world offered us neither kingdoms, nor empires, nor a duration of ages, but the mere shade of a miserable pleasure. And is it for this that we are now bound to bear this weight of eternal tortures? Oh, why were we so foolish, so blind? Who stole away our minds? Who closed our eyes and blocked up our ears? Who so bewitched us that we never thought of these tortures, that we never gave a thought to this latter time? But who so bewitched us that we never provided against this poverty, that we did not heed those who gave us good warnings? If the faculty of intelligence shall suffer all these things, what shall we say of the will, which is the principal cause of sins?